Hello, and welcome to Sleepy Dreams. Tonight we're drifting toward the far southern reaches of our world, to a place where water and stone have been dancing together for thousands of years, where waves have carved cathedrals into rock and light plays tricks on turquoise walls. It's a slow-motion symphony of geology, chemistry, and patient, relentless transformation. A place where time moves differently, measured not in hours, but in millennia. I hope this video isn't too interesting, though if it does happen to keep you awake, at least you'll be learning something fascinating in the process. Not the worst way to spend a sleepless night. Before we begin, if you enjoy drifting off to the gentle hum of natural wonders, I'd be very grateful if you tap the like button and subscribe to the channel. It helps more sleepy minds find their way here. And while you're settling in, I'd love to know where you're watching from and what time it is for you right now. Feel free to share it in the comments. It's always wonderful to see how far these quiet little journeys reach. So, get cozy, let your shoulders relax, let your thoughts slow down like water lapping against ancient stone. And just a soft reminder before we begin. This video is for educational and relaxation purposes only. It's not intended as medical advice, a cure for insomnia, or a replacement for booking an immediate flight to Chilean Patagonia. Though that last one is always encouraged. Let's begin. There are places on Earth that feel like they belong to another world entirely. Places where the ordinary rules of landscape seem suspended, where nature has taken its time to craft something so intricate, so unexpected, that standing before it feels like witnessing a secret. The marble caves of Chile are one such place. Known locally as the Marble Cathedral or Cuevas de Mármol, these formations rise from the waters of General Carrera Lake, the second largest lake in South America, straddling the border between Chile and Argentina. But to call them simply caves feels insufficient. They are chambers, corridors, and galleries. They are sculptures that no human hand could claim credit for. They are the patient work of water-meeting stone, day after day, year after year, for more than 6,000 years. The lake itself is a marvel. Sprawling across nearly 700 square miles, it sits cradled by mountains in a remote corner of Chilean Patagonia. This is a land of extremes, where the Andes cast long shadows and glaciers carve their slow paths through valleys. The water of General Carrera Lake is fed by glacial melt, which gives it a distinctive quality. It's cold, incredibly pure, and depending on the season and the angle of the sun, it shifts between shades of turquoise, azure, emerald, and sapphire. The color alone is enough to take your breath away. But it's what the water has done to the stone that truly captivates. The marble itself is ancient, formed over 300 million years ago. During a period of intense geological activity, the limestone that would eventually become marble was subjected to heat and pressure deep within the Earth's crust. This metamorphic transformation recrystallized the stone, giving it a density and beauty that would prove essential to the formations we see today. The marble here is not uniform. It contains layers of calcium carbonate interspersed with traces of other minerals, iron oxides, sulfides, and quartz. These impurities, far from being flaws, are what give the marble its striking appearance. Swirls of white, gray, pink, yellow, and even deep blue run through the stone like brushstrokes on a canvas. But the marble would have remained hidden, buried beneath the earth, if not for the relentless work of water. Glaciers advanced and retreated over millennia, carving deep basins that would eventually fill to become lakes. As the climate warmed and the ice receded, General Carrera Lake took shape, and at its edges, where the marble met the water, a slow and beautiful process began. Water is deceptively powerful. It seems soft, yielding, harmless, but given enough time, it can reshape mountains. The waves of General Carrera Lake, driven by Patagonian winds, lap against the marble shores with a rhythm that has not ceased for thousands of years. Each wave carries with it fine particles of sediment, tiny grains of rock and mineral that act like sandpaper. As the water rises and falls, driven by wind, weather, and the subtle shifts of the seasons, it wears away at the stone. Not dramatically, not all at once, but slowly, steadily, grain by grain. This process is called erosion, and in the case of the marble caves, it is erosion of the most artistic kind. The waves do not carve randomly. They follow the natural weaknesses in the stone, the places where the marble is softer, where cracks have formed, where mineral composition varies. Over time, these small differences become pronounced. The water hollows out alcoves, tunnels, and chambers. It smooths rough surfaces into flowing curves. It polishes the stone until it gleams. And because the marble contains so many different minerals, the erosion reveals layers of color. The walls of the caves are not a single hue, but a tapestry of tones. Bands of white marble alternate with streaks of pink and gray. In places, iron deposits have oxidized, creating warm ochres and russets. In others, the presence of sulfur lends a subtle yellow tint. The result is a visual symphony, a geological record written in color and texture. But the caves are not static. They continue to change, even now. Every season brings new patterns of erosion. In spring and summer, when glacial melt is at its peak, the water level rises, and the waves reach higher on the marble walls. In autumn and winter, the water recedes slightly, exposing sections that were previously submerged. This cyclical rise and fall creates horizontal bands of erosion, like the rings of a tree, marking the passage of time in stone. The structure of the caves themselves varies widely. Some are shallow alcoves, barely deep enough to shelter a small boat. Others are vast chambers with vaulted ceilings that rise several meters above the waterline. There are narrow passageways where the walls close in on either side, and the only way through is to glide carefully in a kayak or small boat, the marble so close you could reach out and touch it. And there are open galleries where sunlight pours in through wide openings, illuminating the water and the stone in a dazzling display of reflected light. The most famous of these formations is the marble cathedral, a large chamber with sweeping arches and towering columns. The ceiling curves overhead like the vault of a Gothic cathedral, and the walls are adorned with natural pillars and rippling textures that resemble draped fabric. It is a place of quiet grandeur, where the acoustics are such that even the softest sound, a whisper, a splash, seems to linger in the air. Nearby is the marble chapel, a smaller but no less beautiful formation. Here the stone takes on a more intimate quality. The curves are tighter, the colors more concentrated. The light filters in through narrow openings, casting dramatic shadows and highlighting the intricate patterns in the marble. It feels like a place of contemplation, a natural sanctuary carved by time and water. And then there is the marble cave itself, a long, winding passage that twists through the rock. The walls here are sculpted into smooth, flowing forms that seem almost liquid. It is easy to forget, as you float through these spaces, that you are surrounded by solid stone. The marble looks soft, almost alive, as if it might shift and change before your eyes. But of course it does not. The stone is patient. The changes it undergoes are measured not in moments, but in centuries. And yet, there is something deeply moving about being in the presence of such slow transformation. It is a reminder that the world is always in flux, always becoming, even when we cannot see it happening. The color of the caves is perhaps their most striking feature, but that color is not inherent to the marble alone. It is a collaboration between stone, water, and light. The turquoise hue of the lake is caused by the fine particles of glacial sediment suspended in the water. These particles, ground to a powder by the movement of glaciers over bedrock, scatter sunlight in a way that emphasizes blue and green wavelengths. The result is a watercolor so vivid it almost seems artificial. When this turquoise water laps against the white and pale marble, something magical happens. The light reflects off the water and onto the stone, bathing the walls in shades of blue and green. The effect is dynamic, constantly shifting with the movement of the water and the angle of the sun. In the morning, when the light is soft and golden, the caves take on a warm, ethereal glow. At midday, when the sun is high, the colors are at their most intense, a brilliant, almost electric blue. In the late afternoon, as the light softens again, the hues deepen, becoming richer and more saturated. And in the evening, as the sun dips behind the mountains, the caves are bathed in a gentle, dusky light, the colors muted but no less beautiful. The interplay of light and water creates patterns that are never quite the same twice. Ripples on the surface of the lake cast dancing reflections on the marble walls, creating the illusion of movement and depth. Shadows shift and change as clouds pass overhead, or as the wind stirs the water. And because the marble itself is translucent in places, light can penetrate the stone, creating a subtle glow that seems to come from within. It is a place that rewards patience. The longer you spend in the caves, the more you notice. The way a particular vein of quartz catches the light, the subtle gradations of color in a swirl of marble, the texture of the stone, smooth in some places, pitted and rough in others, the sound of water echoing off the walls, a soft, rhythmic lapping that becomes a kind of meditation. And it is a place that changes with the seasons. In spring, when the glacial melt is at its peak, the water level is high, and the caves are filled with a sense of vitality and movement. The colors are fresh and bright, and the air is crisp and cool. In summer, the water is at its warmest, though still quite cold by most standards, and the light is at its most intense. The caves are at their most photogenic during these months, and visitors from around the world make the journey to see them. In autumn, the water begins to recede, and the colors take on a deeper, more subdued quality. The crowds thin, and the caves return to a state of quiet solitude. And in winter, the lake is often rough and inhospitable, the weather unpredictable, and the caves are left to themselves, visited only by the wind and the waves. The remoteness of the marble caves adds to their allure. General Carrera Lake is located in the Asin region of Chilean Patagonia, one of the most sparsely populated areas in the country. The nearest town of any size is Chile Chico, a small settlement on the southern shore of the lake. Getting to the caves requires a journey. From the capital city of Santiago, it is a flight to Balmaceda, followed by a long drive through rugged, mountainous terrain. The roads are often unpaved, winding through valleys and along cliffsides, offering glimpses of snow-capped peaks and vast, empty landscapes. But the journey is part of the experience. This is a region where nature feels untamed. where the scale of the landscape dwarfs human presence. It is a place of big skies and bigger silences, where the air is clean and cold, and the horizon stretches endlessly. And at the end of that journey, at the edge of a vast blue lake, are the caves. Access to the caves is by boat or kayak. There are no roads, no walkways, no infrastructure beyond the small docks in nearby villages. Local guides offer tours, taking visitors out onto the lake in small wooden boats or allowing them to paddle kayaks through the chambers and passages. The experience is intimate and immersive. You are at the mercy of the water, rising and falling with the waves, navigating by feel as much as by sight. The marble walls rise around you, close enough to touch, and the light dances on the surface of the lake, reflected 1,000 times over. There is a reverence that comes with being in such a place, a sense that you are witness to something larger than yourself, something that has existed long before you arrived and will continue long after you leave. The caves are not fragile, exactly. Marble is a hard stone, and the formations have withstood thousands of years of wind and water. But they are also irreplaceable. There is no other place on Earth quite like this, no other combination of marble, glacial water, and erosion that has produced such a result. And yet, the caves are not without their vulnerabilities. Climate change is altering the flow of water into General Carrera Lake. Glaciers are retreating, and the amount of glacial melt entering the lake is changing. This could affect the water level, the color, and even the rate of erosion. There are also concerns about tourism. As the caves have become better known, the number of visitors has increased. While this brings economic benefits to the local communities, it also raises questions about how to protect the caves from damage, whether from boats scraping against the marble, from pollution, or simply from the cumulative impact of human presence. There are no easy answers. But there is a growing awareness, both among locals and visitors, that the marble caves are a treasure worth protecting. Efforts are being made to promote sustainable tourism, to educate visitors about the geology and ecology of the area, and to ensure that future generations will be able to experience the caves as they are today. For now, the caves remain much as they have been for thousands of years, a place of beauty and mystery, carved by the patient work of water and time. They are a reminder that some of the most extraordinary things in the world are not made by human hands, but by the slow, steady processes of nature. They are a testament to the power of erosion, not as a destructive force, but as a creative one, capable of transforming solid rock into something that feels almost otherworldly. The geology of the marble caves is a story written in layers, a narrative that spans hundreds of millions of years. To understand how the caves came to be, we must travel back in time, long before humans walked the earth, to an era when the continents were arranged differently and the climate was almost unrecognizable. The marble began its life as limestone, a sedimentary rock formed from the accumulation of marine organisms. Shells, coral, and other calcium-rich materials settled on the ocean floor, layer upon layer, compressing over time into solid rock. This process took place during the Paleozoic era, roughly 300 million years ago, when much of what is now South America was covered by shallow seas. But limestone alone does not make marble. The transformation from limestone to marble requires heat and pressure, the kind of intense conditions found deep within the Earth's crust. This metamorphism occurred as tectonic forces pushed the limestone downward, subjecting it to temperatures of several hundred degrees and pressures that would crush most materials. Under these conditions, the calcium carbonate in the limestone recrystallized, forming larger, interlocking crystals. The result was marble, a metamorphic rock that is denser, harder, and more visually striking than its sedimentary parent. The marble of the Patagonian Andes is particularly beautiful because it contains a variety of mineral impurities. Iron oxides give it shades of pink, red, and rust. Sulfur compounds add yellows and golds. Quartz veins run through it like rivers of white light. And in some places, the presence of organic material has created dark, almost black streaks. These variations in color and texture are not random. They reflect the conditions under which the marble formed, the temperature, the pressure, the presence of different minerals in the surrounding rock. Once formed, the marble remained buried for millions of years. But the story was far from over. South America, like all continents, is in constant motion, driven by the slow, inexorable forces of plate tectonics. The Nazca Plate, a section of the Earth's oceanic crust, is subducting beneath the South American plate, sliding under it at a rate of a few centimeters per year. This collision is what has given rise to the Andes Mountains, one of the longest and highest mountain ranges in the world. As the Andes rose, the marble was pushed upward as well, carried toward the surface by the same forces that built the mountains. But even as the mountains rose, they were being eroded. Wind, rain, ice, and rivers worked to wear them down, carving valleys and shaping peaks. And in some places, the erosion exposed the marble, bringing it into contact with the elements for the first time in hundreds of millions of years. This is where the glaciers enter the story. During the Pleistocene epoch, beginning about 2.5 million years ago, the Earth experienced a series of ice ages. Massive ice sheets advanced and retreated across the continents, and in the southern Andes, glaciers carved deep U-shaped valleys and gouged out basins that would eventually become lakes. General Carrera Lake is one such basin, formed by the erosive power of glacial ice. As the climate warmed and the glaciers retreated, meltwater filled the basin, creating the lake we see today. And at the edges of the lake, where the marble met the water, the process of erosion began anew. But this was a different kind of erosion, gentler, more patient, more artistic. The waves of General Carrera Lake are driven by wind. Patagonia is famously windy, with gusts that can reach gale force, sweeping across the open waters of the lake and generating waves that batter the shoreline. These waves carry with them fine particles of sediment, rock flour ground to a powder by the movement of glaciers. As the waves strike the marble, the sediment acts as an abrasive, wearing away the stone grain by grain. But the erosion is not uniform. The marble, despite its hardness, is not homogeneous. Some layers are softer than others, and some contain veins or cracks that make them more vulnerable to erosion. The water exploits these weaknesses, carving out hollows and channels, creating the complex three-dimensional forms that characterize the caves. The process is astonishingly slow. It is estimated that the caves have been forming for at least 6,000 years, and possibly longer. That means that the stone is being worn away at a rate of just a few millimeters per century. And yet, over thousands of years, those millimeters add up. What began as a flat or gently sloping shoreline has been transformed into a labyrinth of caves, arches, and passages. The chemistry of the water also plays a role. Glacial meltwater is slightly acidic due to the presence of dissolved carbon dioxide. This acidity allows the water to slowly dissolve calcium carbonate, the primary component of marble. The process is similar to the way that rainwater dissolves limestone to form stalactites and stalagmites in underground caves. But in the case of the marble caves, the dissolution is happening on the outside of the rock, not the inside, and it is combined with mechanical erosion to create a unique set of forms. The colors of the marble are also a product of chemistry. Iron, one of the most common impurities in the stone, can exist in several different oxidation states. When exposed to water and oxygen, iron can oxidize, much like rust forming on metal. This oxidation gives the marble its warm, reddish tones. Sulfur compounds, on the other hand, tend to produce yellows and golds, and the pure, white marble, untouched by mineral impurities, reflects light in a way that enhances the colors of the surrounding stone and water. But it is the interaction between the marble and the glacial water that creates the most stunning visual effects. The turquoise color of the lake is not a property of the water itself, but a result of how light interacts with the fine particles suspended in it. These particles, often called glacial flour, are so small that they remain suspended in the water column rather than settling to the bottom. When sunlight enters the water, it is scattered by these particles. Blue and green wavelengths are scattered more effectively than other colors, which is why the water appears turquoise. This turquoise water acts like a giant reflector, bouncing light onto the marble walls of the caves. The light is filtered through the water, tinted by its color, and then reflected back, bathing the stone in shades of blue and green. The effect is amplified by the smoothness of the marble, which has been polished by thousands of years of erosion. The stone reflects light almost like a mirror, creating a shimmering, luminous quality that seems to glow from within. And because the water is constantly in motion, the patterns of light are never static. Ripples on the surface create shifting patterns of light and shadow. Waves cause the water level to rise and fall, exposing and submerging different sections of the marble. Clouds passing overhead can dim or brighten the light in an instant. And the angle of the sun changes throughout the day, altering the color and intensity of the light. The result is a dynamic, ever-changing spectacle, a natural light show that is never the same twice. The marble caves are not just a visual wonder, they are also a place of sound. The acoustics within the caves are remarkable, shaped by the hard, reflective surfaces of the marble and the enclosed spaces of the chambers. Every sound is amplified and echoed, from the splash of a paddle to the drip of water from the ceiling, to the gentle lapping of waves against the stone. There is a particular quality to the sound in the caves, a resonance that seems to linger in the air. It is the kind of sound that invites silence, that makes you want to stop and listen, to pay attention to the rhythms of the water and the echoes of your own presence. Some visitors have described it as meditative, a natural cathedral where the walls themselves seem to hum with a quiet, ancient energy. And in a way, they do. The marble has been here in one form or another for hundreds of millions of years. It has witnessed the rise and fall of mountains, the advance and retreat of glaciers, the slow dance of continents. It is a record of deep time, a tangible connection to the distant past. And every ripple, every curve, every band of color is part of that record, a story written in stone and water and light. To stand in the marble caves or to float through them in a small boat is to be in the presence of that story. It is to feel the weight of time, the patience of geological processes, the beauty of transformation. It is a reminder that the world is far older than we are, and that the forces that shape it are still at work, still carving and sculpting and polishing, even now, even as we watch. The experience of visiting the marble caves is as much about the journey as it is about the destination. This is not a place you can reach easily or quickly. It requires planning, patience, and a willingness to venture into one of the most remote and rugged regions on Earth. But for those who make the trip, the rewards are immeasurable. The journey typically begins in Santiago, Chile's capital, a bustling metropolis of nearly 6 million people. From there, travelers take a flight south to Balmaceda, a small airport in the Asen region. The flight itself is spectacular, offering views of the Andes Mountains, their peaks capped with snow, and the vast empty landscapes of Patagonia stretching out below. From Balmaceda, the journey continues by road. The drive to the shores of General Carrera Lake takes several hours, winding through valleys and along mountain passes. The roads are often unpaved, rough and dusty in summer, muddy and treacherous in winter. This is a region where infrastructure is minimal, where towns are few and far between, and where the natural world dominates. But the landscape is breathtaking. The Andes rise on one side, their slopes covered in forests of southern beech, their peaks bare and rocky. On the other side, the land opens up into vast grasslands, dotted with scrub and wildflowers. Rivers run cold and clear, fed by glaciers and snowmelt. And everywhere, there is a sense of space, of openness, of a world untouched by the crowding and noise of modern life. As you approach General Carrera Lake, the landscape changes. The mountains give way to rolling hills, and suddenly, there it is, the lake, vast and impossibly blue, stretching to the horizon. It is a sight that stops you in your tracks, that makes you catch your breath. The water is so bright, so vivid, that it almost seems unreal, as if someone had spilled a pot of turquoise paint across the landscape. The towns along the shore of the lake are small and quiet. Puerto Rio Tranquilo, on the western shore, is the main launching point for visits to the marble caves. It is a modest settlement, a collection of wooden houses, a few shops, a handful of guest houses and restaurants. The people here are friendly and welcoming, accustomed to the trickle of visitors who come to see the caves, but not overwhelmed by tourism. Life moves at a slower pace here, dictated by the rhythms of the seasons and the moods of the lake. From Puerto Rio Tranquilo, it is a short boat ride to the caves. The boats are small, simple wooden craft, often painted in bright colors, piloted by local guides who know the lake and its moods intimately. Some visitors choose to go by kayak, paddling out onto the water and navigating the caves under their own power. This offers a more intimate experience, a closer connection to the water and the stone, but it requires a certain level of skill and comfort on the water. As the boat or kayak leaves the shore, the landscape opens up around you. The lake is enormous, its far shore barely visible in the distance. The water is cold, even in summer, and remarkably clear. You can see down several meters, to rocks and pebbles on the bottom, to schools of fish darting through the shallows. The color of the water is mesmerizing, shifting from pale aqua in the shallows to deep sapphire in the depths. And then, as you round a headland, the marble caves come into view. At first, they are just shapes on the shore, outcroppings of pale rock rising from the water. But as you draw closer, the details begin to emerge. The swirls of color, the smooth flowing curves, the openings that lead into the chambers beyond. And then you are there, gliding into the first of the caves, and the world changes. Inside, the light takes on a quality that is hard to describe. It is soft and diffuse, filtered through the water and reflected off the marble. The walls glow with shades of blue and green, as if lit from within. The stone is smooth and cool to the touch, polished by centuries of erosion. The water laps gently against the rock, creating a rhythmic, soothing sound that echoes through the chamber. As you move deeper into the caves, the sense of enclosure grows. The walls close in, the ceiling lowers, and you find yourself in a narrow passage, the marble just inches away on either side. The light dims and the colors deepen. There is a sense of intimacy here, a feeling of being inside something, of being held gently by the stone and the water. And then the passage opens up again, and you find yourself in a larger chamber. The ceiling arches overhead, supported by natural pillars of marble. Light pours in through a wide opening, illuminating the space in a dazzling display of color and reflection. The water is a mirror, doubling the height of the chamber, creating the illusion of infinite space. You can spend hours exploring the caves, moving from chamber to chamber, each one unique, each one beautiful in its own way. Some are grand and cathedral-like, with soaring ceilings and dramatic arches. Others are small and cozy, almost womb-like, with low ceilings and close walls. Some are filled with light, others are dim and shadowy. But all of them share that same sense of wonder, that same feeling of being in the presence of something extraordinary. The guides who lead tours of the caves are often locals, men and women who have lived on the shores of General Carrera Lake all their lives. They know the caves intimately, every passage and chamber, every shift in water level and light. They can tell you about the geology, the history, the legends. They can point out details you might otherwise miss, a particularly striking vein of quartz, a section of marble that glows almost translucent in the right light, a spot where the water is so still it becomes a perfect mirror. But they also know when to be silent, when to let the caves speak for themselves. There are moments as you float through the chambers when words feel inadequate, when the only appropriate response is quiet awe. And the guides understand this. They understand that the marble caves are not just a tourist attraction, but a sacred space, a place that deserves respect and reverence. For many visitors, the experience of the marble caves is profound. It is not just about seeing something beautiful, though the caves are certainly that. It is about connecting with something larger, something ancient and timeless. It is about stepping outside the rush and noise of everyday life and entering a space where time moves differently, where the concerns of the modern world feel distant and small. There is a meditative quality to the caves, a sense of peace and stillness that is hard to find elsewhere. The gentle rocking of the boat, the soft sound of water, the play of light on stone, all of these combine to create an experience that is deeply calming, almost hypnotic. Many visitors find themselves falling into a state of quiet contemplation, letting their thoughts drift, simply being present in the moment. And there is a sense of gratitude, too. Gratitude for the long, slow processes that created the caves. Gratitude for the forces of nature that continue to shape them. Gratitude for the opportunity to witness something so rare and beautiful. It is a reminder that the world is full of wonders, if only we take the time to seek them out. The people who live in the region around General Carrera Lake have a deep connection to the marble caves. For them, the caves are not just a geological curiosity or a source of tourism income, though they are both of those things. They are part of the landscape, part of the identity of the place. They are a source of pride, a reminder of the unique beauty of this remote corner of the world. The region has not always been prosperous. Aysén is one of the poorest and least developed areas of Chile, with a harsh climate, limited infrastructure, and few economic opportunities. For generations, people here have made their living from the land, raising sheep and cattle, fishing in the lake, harvesting timber from the forests. It has been a hard life, shaped by isolation and the challenges of living in such a remote and unforgiving environment. But in recent years, tourism has brought new opportunities. Visitors from around the world come to see the marble caves, and they bring with them money, jobs, and a renewed sense of possibility. Guest houses have opened, restaurants have expanded their menus, and local guides have found work leading tours. For many families, tourism has provided a lifeline, a way to stay in the region and build a future. But there is also a tension. The influx of visitors brings benefits, but it also brings challenges. How do you balance the economic need for tourism with the imperative to protect the caves? How do you ensure that the marble caves remain pristine and beautiful for future generations, while also allowing people to experience them now? These are not easy questions, and there are no simple answers. Some efforts are being made to promote sustainable tourism. Local guides emphasize the importance of respecting the caves, of not touching the marble unnecessarily, of not leaving any trash behind. There are discussions about limiting the number of boats allowed in the caves at any one time, to reduce wear on the stone and to preserve the sense of tranquility. And there is a growing awareness, both among locals and visitors, that the caves are fragile, that they require care and protection. The impact of climate change adds another layer of complexity. The glaciers that feed General Carrera Lake are retreating, and the flow of meltwater is changing. Some scientists predict that the water level of the lake could drop significantly in the coming decades, which would alter the appearance of the caves and could even expose sections that are currently submerged. Others worry that changes in temperature and precipitation could affect the rate of erosion, speeding it up or slowing it down in ways that are difficult to predict. There is also the question of water quality. General Carrera Lake is remarkably pure, but it is not immune to pollution. Agricultural runoff, sewage from small towns, and even the boats that carry tourists to the caves all have the potential to degrade the water. If the water loses its clarity or its distinctive turquoise color, the visual impact of the caves would be diminished. These challenges are not unique to the marble caves. All over the world, natural wonders are facing similar pressures, caught between the desire to share their beauty and the need to protect them. But the marble caves are a particularly poignant example because they are so remote, so fragile, and so dependent on the specific conditions of this one lake in this one corner of the world. And yet, there is hope. The people of the region are deeply committed to protecting the caves. They understand that the caves are not just an economic resource, but a natural treasure, something that belongs not just to them, but to the world. And they are working to find ways to balance tourism with conservation, to ensure that the marble caves remain a place of beauty and wonder for generations to come. For visitors, the responsibility is to approach the caves with respect and mindfulness, to understand that they are not just a backdrop for photographs, but a living, changing landscape that has taken thousands of years to form, to tread lightly, to leave no trace, and to carry away not just memories, but a deeper appreciation for the slow, patient work of nature. In many ways, the marble caves are a metaphor for the broader relationship between humans and the natural world. They remind us that beauty is often the result of processes that unfold over vast stretches of time, beyond the scope of human lifetimes. They remind us that nature is both powerful and delicate, capable of creating wonders, but also vulnerable to disruption. And they remind us that we are not separate from the natural world, but part of it, and that our actions have consequences, both for ourselves and for the landscapes we inhabit. The marble caves are also a place of stories, not just the geological story written in the stone, but the human stories that have unfolded around them. The indigenous peoples who lived in this region long before the arrival of Europeans knew the lake and its shores, though whether they knew the caves specifically is unclear. Their descendants, the mestizo population of Aysén, have their own tales and legends, passed down through generations. Some locals speak of spirits in the caves, of voices that echo through the chambers when no one is there, of lights that dance on the water at night. These are the kinds of stories that grow up around places of beauty and mystery, stories that blend observation with imagination, fact with folklore. They are part of the cultural landscape, as much a part of the caves as the marble itself. There are also stories of discovery, of the first explorers and settlers who ventured into this remote region and encountered the caves. These early visitors, traveling by foot or on horseback or in small boats, must have been awestruck by what they found. In a world without photographs or mass media, the marble caves would have seemed like a private revelation, a secret known only to a fortunate few.